There are good, well-executed, fantastic books, and then there are books that change the way you view the world, that change the way you think. And I'm going to tell you about 8 books that did the latter. And they all happen to be written by trans authors. I'll get into the books in just 40 seconds. But before I discuss them, I want to draw your attention to the hashtag TransGirlApril readathon, which I'm sure you can judge by the name is in April, and it's also about reading books by trans and non-binary authors. Also, you need to denounce fascism, which probably means calling your government out for being a pack of shit stains. Remember, if they can see trans people as unpeople, they can see you as an unperson too. TransGirlApril is hosted by the fabulous Say Kevy and Willow from Books and Bow. Both these women make great videos and are super duper smart. Now quick, let's get on with the books before talking about trans literature gets all political or something. Daryl by Jackie S. Long-term viewers will be surprised to learn that it's been almost 40 videos since I last mentioned Daryl, a number that is entirely made up, I should say. That means that a whole bunch of you will not know about this book yet. You live vicariously through celebrities. I live vicariously through the guy who fucks my wife. But sure, okay, I'm the weird one. Let me ask you this. Do you watch sport at all? I could ask, what's the point if you aren't the one playing? And thus begins Daryl, a dark comedy about cuckolding. This book is absolutely hilarious. Dear LeBron, I want to see your perfect hands gripping my wife, palming almost her entire body. I want her to have your baby. Love, Daryl. I'd never write that. I'd write sincerely. A lot of this book takes place in Daryl's head, who is wondering who is going to stand up for the cucks. It's certainly not going to be the cucks. Should we maybe have an LGBTC acronym? What would happen if I sucked Bill's cock? Would Bill like that? Then there is the potential murder plot. And all of this does point to a lowest common denominator, lowbrow comedy novel. And I would have been down for that, but this book is so much more. A lot of this book takes place in Daryl's head, not so much because Jackie S is allowing Daryl to be introspective, but because that's who Daryl is. Although Jackie S, like any good author, does take advantage of this fact. Daryl is stuck in his head because Daryl is uncertain, because despite being middle-aged, Daryl is questioning things. Sure, some of those things are if Clive is stealing his money, and he's getting really angry about that. But also, he's questioning, is he a woman? He's definitely not a woman. But why was he so keen to pay for Orthoon's top surgery? Daryl is a textbook unreliable narrator, very privileged and with subconscious misogyny, who is nonetheless very submissive. But Daryl is exploring those misogynist thoughts, and also thoughts about how he would feel if Mindy took a woman lover. Not very comfortable. And all of this weirdly works. Daryl is developing and growing through these weird sexual experiences. Daryl is a character the likes of which I have never seen before, but whose actions make complete sense within the rubric that is him. Daryl's thoughts can be quite problematic, but they're thoughts that reveal that he is probably an egg and going through something. An egg is a term trans people use to describe trans people before they realise that they're trans. But the question of this book is, will Daryl crack? Daryl is a novel about power dynamics, about self-discovery, pleasure, danger, about gender roles and sexuality. You will think about new topics, confronting topics, and realise that people's lives, no matter how different they seem, are really not that different. This has to be one of the approximately 20 books I would place in the top 10 books that I have ever read. The idea of cross-dressing is so fucked up, man. Like, what do actual women actually wear? Not big frilly dresses, t-shirts and jeans, yoga pants, fast fashion bullshit. So what's cross-dressing? That's what I already wear. It's an attitude. I like the frilly lacy stuff as much as the next guy, but I'm not trying to support the petticoat industry complex. It's in the soul, man. I could just be a little bit prettier. Maybe I wouldn't say a damn word to anybody about it, and I'd just feel better. I bet Bill would, let me make him happy sometimes. One of the most confronting things about reading all these quotes is that my father-in-law is called Bill, and this is a little bit gross. The prettiest star, Carter Sickle. There are certain topics that we can keep coming back to and finding different stories within them, and the AIDS epidemic certainly is one. Trans people have a higher rate of AIDS infection than cis people. Trans women have the highest infection rate in the world. But that's a side note, because this is a beautiful book by a trans author without a trans character. At 18, Brian left home and arrived in New York. 6 years later, he writes to his mother asking if he can come home to die. Brian's family, his grandmother, his sister, his mother, his father, they all have different views on Brian's homosexuality, different levels of accepting or bigotry, different levels of curiosity. But Brian is going to die at the end of this novel, and the question is, what will his relationship be with his family when he does exit? A crushingly sad, tender and beautiful novel. Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. I think you could count the number of authors more talented than Emezi on one hand, potentially even just on one finger. Emezi is phenomenal, and Freshwater, their debut novel, is probably their best. Ada is a young Nigerian woman, a vessel for an Abanji, a god. Within Ada, there are several divine entities that better cope with the situation that the Ada struggles to cope with. And when Ada moves to America to study, these alternate selves grow in influence. The Ada goes through a series of traumatic and horrible events in America. They also explore their gender identity. These things mirror Emezi's own life. We get lovely, emotionally rich chapters, devastating scenes, and that maybe leads you to think that Emezi is writing sentimental, emotionally heartbreaking literature where you can learn from a different perspective. And they're certainly doing that, but there is so much more to it than that. Central to this book is the idea of the colonialization of African spiritual beliefs. There is a clear mirroring of how an Abanji manifests in Nigerian beliefs and the multiple personality disorder of Western psychology. And this raises the question, does the West dismiss African beliefs without first understanding them? Can the West learn from African culture? Are these two things essentially just two different ways of explaining the same phenomenon? And would a Nigerian person be more comfortable with a Nigerian explanation? This book is just so complete. It's not emotional brain food, it's an emotional brain all-you-can-eat buffet. And I've already said this once in this video, but this is one of the approximately 20 books that I would try to fit into my top 10 books of all time. Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars, Kai Chen Tom. A Dangerous Trans Girl's Confabulous Memoir. The last book, Freshwater, a lot of people call that magical realism. I don't really agree with that definition, but for this book I certainly do, and regular viewers will know my opinion on magical realism. So, because I'm now recommending you a magical realism, let me assure you that I am not Scott's evil twin, and I haven't kidnapped him, tied him up, and will be selling his organs on the black market. By the way, special 2-for-1 kidneys. This book is inspired by Audre Lorde's Biomythographies, a book which mythologizes the author's life. Tom has written a memoir about a gang of trans Asian sex workers who get into fights with rival gangs and the cops, and often kill people, such as the cops. This is a story where trans girls fight back. They're morally ambiguous, but they're not always the victims. I kind of feel like this is what would have happened if somebody gave Jonathan Waters a copy of A Clockwork Orange and said, don't worry about accuracies, but make it trans and make it fabulous. This book isn't just a rejection of authority and oppression, but is also about coming out as a trans person and how that changes your relationship with both your siblings and your parents. The Death of Vivek OG. Yeah, I put Akwaeke Emezi on here twice. It's my video. I can do what I want. And anyway, they're incredible. I also recommend Dear Centurion, You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, Pet, and anything else they've published or will publish in the future. Again, this is a book about Nigerian spirituality, love, loss, trauma, and a trans coming of age. We know from the title of the novel that Vivek OG will die at some point, but how and why represents the mystery. Nigeria is a country with a reputation for homophobia, a bigotry that really extends into transphobia, and we're left feeling really uncomfortable about the safety of our characters. Osita and Vivek are cousins, friends, and possibly more, but Osita's relationship with Vivek is all over the place. At times, you question Osita's feelings, but they really do represent the complex series of emotions that a young person might go through when they have a crush on somebody, regardless of whether they're trans or not. Within Vivek's family, there is also a variety of responses to Vivek's appearance, Vivek's expression, and gender identity. Nigerian spirituality and trans identity interact with each other in very different ways to Freshwater. And Maisie is showing us the positive and the negative sides of religion in their country. Is Vivek possessed by demons? Does Vivek contain the spirit of their grandmother? Maisie has done that thing where they have smashed a kaleidoscope of ideas into what is just a very compelling story. Add to this novel themes of trauma, the impact of trauma, family, friendship, the difference between family and friendship, especially for teenagers, and the general concept of being a young person living in Nigeria and a young trans person living in Nigeria. This is a great book. Tell Me I'm Worthless, Alison Rumford. A horror novel about a trans girl and a TERF who used to be in love and best friends. But there used to be 3 of them, until one day the 3 girls go into a haunted house and only 2 of them come out. Now Illa wants Alice to go back to the haunted house with her. The haunted house is called Albion, an intentionally unsubtle metaphor for England. What I love is how both girls disagree on what the other girl did inside the house. They both did absolutely terrible things to each other, but they don't remember doing it to one another. They quite simply don't agree on what happens. If the haunted house represents England, then the girls' actions inside the house represent the influence society has on them, how they treat people differently because of the whispering. This is a fantastic horror novel that appears to be not in the real world, but it's quite clear that the real world is inspiring this horror novel, and that the things that happen can very well be seen as happening to trans and cis women alike. A story about how everybody loses when it comes to transphobia, and just a terrifying haunted house story to boot. Detransition Baby, Tory Peters. I think that this is an absolutely fantastic first trans novel for cis people to read. Although I acknowledge that that wasn't the intent of Tory Peters when she wrote it, that Peters is writing a book for trans readers. Ames is in a relationship with Katrina, their boss, and Katrina definitely can't get pregnant because Ames used to be a trans woman, but detransitioned. A decade of hormone treatment should render their swimmers useless. But sperms are just like Trump voters. It only takes one to spoil a cozy atmosphere. And Katrina is pregnant, and hence we have our title, Detransition Baby. Ames, when she was going by Amy, dated Reese. Reese, who desperately wants to be a mother, but can't because she's also trans. Ames gets the idea that Ames, Reese and Katrina can raise the child together, and this book explores that. Although a lot of this book is actually exploring Amy and Reese's relationship prior. This book is full of really challenging and thought-provoking lines such as, Reese wanted to end their game, to get hit in a way that would affirm, once and for all, what she wanted to feel about her womanhood, her delicacy, her helplessness, her infuriating attractiveness. After all, every woman adores a fascist. What exactly is Tory Peters saying with that line? I'll tell you one thing for sure. It's not that every woman should adore a fascist. For me, as a cisgendered straight man, that this book was showing me cisgendered straight people chasing Amy and Reese made me question a few things. Did I really see trans women as women? Should I be attracted to them or not? Why do I even think that I should or shouldn't be attracted to anybody? Am I heterosexual due to some inbuilt societal assumptions that I can't overturn? And does that also apply to my gender? Does the very existence of trans women make me feel uncomfortable about my own sexuality? I mean, is there a single heterosexual man out there that thinks Kylie Sonique Love is less attractive than Margaret Thatcher? And is this challenging of my sexual identity where trans hate comes from other cis men? The answer to this is clearly yes, but also that's only a fraction of the answer. All those questions are only the tip of the iceberg, and any question that can get you to ask those questions and to think those things, that is a great book. I enjoyed the emotional roller coaster, this storyline and the character portrait, but these are just bonuses. At certain points we touch Lauren John Joseph, my most recent trans read. This is a story of a trans woman and her first love, a photographer called Thomas James. She learns of James's death at the start of this novel, and it is a reflective piece about their time together. At the time of their relationship, she hadn't yet figured out she was trans, but she was femme. This is a relationship of animal intensity, of power plays and toxicity, simultaneously attracted to and repulsed by one another. This is about misogyny within the gay world. But it's also about art, memories, letters, emails, text, photographs, our legacy, and the impact we have on the people around us. And it's a coming of age story about a woman who's about to realize she's a woman. This is such a wonderful blending of different issues and ideas that creates this wonderful collage of thoughts that build these rich characters and complex relationships. But for me, the absolute star of this show is an issue I haven't seen discussed in fiction before, an issue I don't think people want to explore. That is the treatment of femmes within the LGBT world. For me, this perfectly demonstrates the intersectionality between feminism and trans activism. It points out that if we didn't live in a heteronormative world, that this would be pretty much the same thing, that the hate of these two groups, the toxicity that they're fighting against, that it comes from the same place, that they have the same enemy. It is not just a calling out of toxic gay men, but it is also, without even mentioning it, just pointing out how ridiculous TERFs are. This is a truly complex and thought-provoking novel that I really recommend. There we go. That's 8 novels. Now, as trans girl April is approaching fast, tell me, are there any trans books that you particularly loved? And please give this video a thumbs up. If I get more than 150 thumbs up, I'm going to make a video about each letter of the acronym. Bye bye.